The text came in at 2:47 p.m. while I was sitting in advanced developmental psychology, pretending to care about Piaget's stages of cognitive development. "Did you sell your car? Some guy's towing it." My phone buzzed 12 more times in rapid succession. All missed calls from the same number I'd been dodging for 3 days. My name is Vada, and at 25, I thought I'd finally figured out how to adult. I had my master's program, my own house, my independence. What I didn't have was the ability to ignore my mother when she decided to blow up my phone during class. I grabbed my backpack and bolted for the parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. The space where my Honda Civic should have been was empty, except for oil stains and my own disbelief. The drive home felt like swimming through concrete. Every red light stretched into eternity while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was repossessed. Maybe someone stole it. Maybe this was all some terrible mistake. But deep down, in that sick, twisted part of my gut that knew my family better than I wanted to, I already knew the truth. I found her exactly where I expected, sprawled across my couch like she owned the place, which technically she partially did. That was my first mistake. The remote was balanced on her stomach, and she was watching some daytime talk show about people who steal from their own children. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Oh good, you're home?" she said, without looking away from the screen. "I was wondering when you get my messages." "Where's my car, Mom?" Vivian finally turned to face me, and I saw that familiar expression, the one that said she was about to deliver news like it was a gift I should be grateful for. "I sold it." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I stood there, keys still in my hand, staring at this woman who'd given birth to me 25 years ago and apparently thought that gave her ownership rights over everything I touched. "You what?" "I got $6,500 for it. Cash." She said it like she'd just announced she'd won the lottery. "Monica helped me post it on Facebook Marketplace. You should have seen how fast people responded." Monica, of course. My mother's best friend and fellow enabler, always ready to help with whatever scheme would make them both feel important. "That wasn't your car to sell." "Honey, you're barely keeping up with your payments. I was helping you out." She sat up now, switching into what I called her concerned mother voice. "You're just a kid playing grown-up. These financial responsibilities are too much for someone your age." I'd heard variations of this speech my entire adult life. When I'd gotten my first apartment at 19, I was too young to live alone. When I'd started graduate school, I was taking on too much debt. When I'd bought this house at 24, the house we were currently sitting in, the house I'd worked 3 jobs to afford, I was getting in over my head. "I'm 25, Mum. I have a master's degree. I own this house." "We own this house," she corrected. And there it was. The reminder that, in a moment of guilt and misplaced love, I'd added her name to the deed. "For safety," she'd said. "In case something happened to me. What if I got sick? What if I couldn't make payments?" What I hadn't realized was that I was signing away my right to make decisions about my own life. The car was in my name only. "Details." She waved her hand dismissively. "I had the spare key, and frankly, Vada, you weren't using it responsibly. Driving to school every day when you could take the bus, wasting gas money you don't have." I could feel something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot and messy and led to screaming matches that went nowhere. This was something else entirely. Something calculated. "Where's the money?" "I deposited it into my account for safekeeping." "You know how you are with money?" I didn't know how I was with money, actually, because I'd never had any real problems managing it. I paid my bills on time, kept a budget, even had a small emergency fund. But according to my mother, I was one impulse purchase away from financial ruin. "I want it back." "Vada, sweetie, you're being dramatic. This is what mothers do. We make the hard decisions our children can't make for themselves." I nodded slowly, like I was considering her words. Like maybe she had a point. Like maybe I really was just a kid playing grown-up who needed her mommy to sell her car without permission. Then I walked to my filing cabinet. "What are you doing?" I pulled out the folder labeled House Documents and flipped through until I found what I was looking for. The deed. Both our names printed in official black ink. Just checking on something. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Talon? It's Vader. I need to see you tomorrow. It's time. Who's Talon? My mother asked, but I was already walking toward my bedroom. A friend. Vada, don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you. I stopped at my doorway and turned back. She was sitting up straighter now, the remote forgotten on the coffee table. For the first time since I'd walked in, she looked uncertain. We're done talking, Mum. You sold my car, without asking, without telling me. You took $6,500 that belonged to me and put it in your account. I kept my voice level, almost conversational. There's nothing left to discuss. I was protecting you from yourself. You'll thank me later. Will I? She stood up and followed me down the hallway. You're acting like a child. This is exactly why you need guidance. You can't see the bigger picture. I pulled out my laptop and opened it on my bed. My mother hovered in the doorway, like she was afraid to cross some invisible line. What bigger picture is that? You're drowning in student loans, you work part-time at that clinic, and you're trying to maintain a house you can barely afford. The car payment was just another burden. I never missed a car payment. Yet. That word hung between us like a challenge. Yet. Like she was waiting for me to fail, planning for it, maybe even hoping for it, so she could swoop in and save me from myself. I started typing, pulling up websites I hadn't visited in months, legal aid sites, property law forums, real estate attorneys in our area. What are you doing? Research. For what? I looked up at her then, really looked at her. At 53, my mother was still beautiful in that sharp, angular way that made people pay attention. But there was something else there now, something I'd been too close to see clearly. A hunger. Like she fed off being needed, off being the one with all the answers. Tell me about the Facebook post. What about it? What exactly did you and Monica post? She shifted uncomfortably. Just the car. We said it was well maintained, low mileage. Show me. I don't have to show you anything. I'm your mother. Show me the post, Mum. She pulled out her phone with exaggerated reluctance, scrolling through Facebook until she found it. She held the screen toward me, and I took the phone to read it properly. 2018 Honda Civic, excellent condition, one owner, must sell due to family emergency. $6,500 firm. Family emergency? It was just to make people respond faster. Everyone knows emergency sales get more attention. I scrolled down to read the comments. Dozens of them. People asking about mileage, accident history, availability for viewing, and then I saw something that made my blood freeze. Monica posted about my dining room table too. What? I turned the phone screen toward her. There it was, in the comments section. Monica had replied to someone asking about furniture. Actually, we have a beautiful dining set available too. Real wood, seats 6. Message me for details. She's selling my furniture? Now, Vada, let's not jump to conclusions. My furniture, that I bought, with my money, in my house. Our house. No. I stood up and handed her phone back. My house, that I bought, that I pay the mortgage on, that I pay the utilities for, that I maintain and repair and insure. Your name might be first on the deed, but mine is there too. That makes me an owner. Does it? Something in my tone must have warned her because she took a step back. Of course it does. We went to the lawyer together. You insisted on adding me. You insisted I add you. You said it was for safety, in case I got sick or hurt or couldn't make decisions for myself. Exactly. And look how right I was. You're making terrible financial decisions. Someone needs to step in. Someone like you. Yes, someone like me. I closed my laptop and stood up. Get out of my room. Vada? Get out of my room, get off my couch, and get out of my house. This is my house too. We'll see about that. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not anger, not hurt, fear. You can't kick me out. I live here. You visit here. Your mail still goes to your apartment across town. Your driver's license still lists your old address. You crash on my couch when you don't want to be alone. I gave up my lease to help you with expenses. You gave up your lease because you couldn't afford it anymore. There's a difference. She opened her mouth to argue, but I was already walking past her toward the front door. I want you gone when I get back. Where are you going? I grabbed my keys, my house keys, since I no longer had car keys, and my wallet, to get my car back. You can't. I already signed the title over. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. To who? Some college kid. He paid cash and drove it away this morning. What's his name? I don't remember. Mum, what's his name? Tyler something. Tyler? Morrison? Morimoto? I don't know, Vader. It's done. I walked outside and called an Uber. While I waited, I called Holden. Hey, can you do me a favor? I need you to search Facebook Marketplace for anyone selling a 2018 Honda Civic today. Blue, license plate starts with 7G. Why would I? Oh no. What did she do? Just find the car, Holden, please. On it. And Vada, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry yet. Be sorry tomorrow. Talon's office smelled like leather and coffee, the kind of place that charged by the hour and made you feel like your problems were solvable if you had enough money. I'd met him 2 years ago when I bought the house, a quiet guy in his 30s who specialized in real estate law and didn't ask unnecessary questions. So she sold your car, he said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. Without your permission, using a spare key. Yes? And now you want to remove her from the property deed? Yes. He leaned back in his chair, studying the paperwork. This is legally possible, but it's going to get messy. She's listed as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. What does that mean in plain English? It means if something happened to you, the house would automatically become hers, but it also means you can't just remove her without her consent or a court order. What if I can prove she was added under false pretenses? Explain. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots I'd taken of our text conversations from 2 years ago. Look at these messages. She convinced me to add her by saying it was temporary, just for emergency purposes. She said she'd never interfere with my decisions about the property. Talon scrolled through the messages, his expression unreadable. This helps, but it's not ironclad. Did she contribute any money to the purchase? Not a penny. I have bank records showing all payments came from my accounts. Good. What about mortgage payments, utilities, maintenance? All me. I can prove everything. He was quiet for several minutes, reading through documents and making notes. Finally, he looked up. There's another option. You could sell the house and buy a new one, in your name only. I don't want to sell. I love that house. I picked it out, I fixed it up, I made it mine. Then we'll need to file a petition action. Basically, we ask the court to divide the property. Since you can prove you paid for everything, and she was added for convenience only, there's a good chance the judge will award you full ownership. How long does that take? 4 to 6 months. Maybe longer. I felt something deflate in my chest. I can't live with her for 6 months. Not after this. There might be a faster way. He pulled out a different form. If she's willing to sign a quitclaim deed voluntarily, we could have this resolved in a week. She'll never sign voluntarily. People change their minds when they realize the alternative is a lengthy court battle they're likely to lose. I stared at the form. What would I need to do? First, we file the partition action. That shows we're serious. Then we present her with the quitclaim deed as an alternative. Sign this, or fight us in court for months while paying legal fees. And if she still refuses? Then we go to trial. But Vada, based on what you've shown me, you have a strong case. You paid for the house, you pay all the expenses, and you have documentation that she was added for emergency purposes only, not as a true co-owner. I signed the retainer agreement and wrote him a check for $3,000, money I'd been saving for a vacation I'd probably never take now. How soon can we file? I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. When I got home, my mother was still there, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of my coffee and my laptop open in front of her. "What are you doing?" "Looking at apartments for you. I found some nice places near campus that would be perfect for a graduate student. I'm not moving." "Honey, be realistic. You can't afford this house without help. The mortgage alone is more than half your income." I walked over and closed the laptop. "Get away from my computer. I'm trying to help you. By selling my car and looking for apartments I didn't ask you to find. By being practical. You're in over your head, and instead of admitting it, you're lashing out at the one person trying to help you." My phone buzzed. A text from Holden. "Found your car. Kid named Tyler posted it for sale again. Wants $7,200. Says he needs to make a quick profit. Want me to call him?" I showed my mother the message. "Your buyer is already trying to flip my car for more money." "That's not my problem." "Actually, it is, because you forged my signature on the title transfer." Her face went pale. "I did not forge anything." "You signed my name without my permission. That's forgery." "I had a spare key. That implies consent. For emergencies, not for selling my property." "Vada, you're being ridiculous. I'm your mother. I was acting in your best interest." I pulled out the papers Talon had given me and set them on the table. "Sign this." She picked up the quitclaim deed and read it slowly. "You want me to give up my rights to the house?" "Yes." "Absolutely not." "Then we'll see you in court?" "What?" I showed her the partition action paperwork. "I'm filing this tomorrow morning. We're going to let a judge decide who really owns this house." She stared at the documents like they might bite her. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. I'm your mother. And I'm an adult who owns property you're trying to steal." "Steal? I'm trying to help you. By selling my car without permission, by having Monica advertise my furniture, by treating me like a child who can't make her own decisions. Because you can't. Look at this mess you've created." "I didn't create this mess, Mum. You did. When you decided my car was yours to sell. When you decided my house was yours to control." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll play. Good. But don't come crying to me when you lose everything." "I won't." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "You have no idea what you're starting." "Actually, I do. I'm starting my life without you in it." The door slammed behind her, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe properly. I cleaned up the spilled coffee, locked the door, and called Talon. "File everything tomorrow morning." "And Talon? Make sure she gets served at work." The process server found my mother at the grocery store, where she worked part-time, bagging groceries and complaining about her life to anyone who'd listen. According to Talon, she'd gone completely white when handed the legal documents, then started crying right there in aisle 7. I was at the psychology clinic, where I worked as a research assistant, when she decided to make her grand entrance. The waiting room was full of patients when she burst through the doors like a hurricane in a floral print dress. "Where is she?" she demanded from the receptionist. "Where's my daughter?" "Ma'am, you'll need to—" "Vada! Get out here right now!" I heard the commotion from the back office and walked out to find my mother standing in the middle of the waiting room, waving legal papers above her head like evidence at a trial. "Mum, you need to leave." "Oh, I need to leave? I need to leave?" Her voice was climbing toward hysteria. "You're the one who needs to leave. You're the one suing your own mother." Every patient in the waiting room was staring. Mrs. Rodriguez, who came in weekly for anxiety treatment, looked like she was about to have a panic attack herself. "This is my workplace. You can't be here." "I can be anywhere I want. I'm fighting for my home." "It's not your home? The deed says otherwise." Holden appeared from the hallway, probably drawn by the shouting. He took one look at the situation and stepped between my mother and me. "Mrs. Santiago, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. This is a medical facility. Don't you dare tell me what to do. This is between me and my ungrateful daughter." "Actually, it's between you and the court system now," I said calmly, "which is exactly where it belongs." She turned to the room full of patients like they were a jury she could win over. Can you believe this? 25 years I raised this girl. 25 years of sacrifice, of putting her needs before my own. And this is how she repays me? By buying my own house and wanting to keep it? I asked. By throwing me out on the street like garbage. You have your own apartment, Mom. You've always had your own apartment. Had. Past tense. I gave up my lease to help you. You gave up your lease because you couldn't afford it. The receptionist was on the phone, probably calling security. Several patients had gotten up and moved to chairs farther away from the drama. I want everyone to know what kind of person my daughter really is, my mother announced to the room. She's selfish and cruel, and she's forgotten everything I've done for her. What have you done for me lately? I asked. Besides sell my car without permission? I was helping you. By stealing from me? It wasn't stealing. I'm your mother. Being my mother doesn't give you ownership rights over my property. Holden touched my arm gently. Security's on their way up. My mother must have heard him because she suddenly deflated, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured balloon. You're really going to do this, she said quietly. You're really going to take me to court. You're really going to make me. She looked around the waiting room, seeming to realize for the first time that she was making a scene in front of strangers. Her cheeks flushed red. This isn't over. Yes, it is. She left just as the security guard arrived, her heels clicking angrily against the tile floor. The waiting room stayed quiet for several minutes after she was gone. I'm sorry, I told the patients. That was unprofessional. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke up from her corner chair. Honey, that wasn't your fault. Some people just don't know how to respect boundaries. When I got home that evening, I found Leah sitting on my front steps. My older sister looked tired, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. We need to talk. About what? About Mum, about this lawsuit, about you losing your mind. I unlocked the front door and let her in. I'm not the one who lost my mind. You're suing our mother, Vada. Our mother? Our mother sold my car without permission and is trying to steal my house. She's not trying to steal anything. She's trying to help you. By selling my property behind my back? Leah sat down on my couch, the same couch where our mother had been lounging yesterday like she owned the place. She's worried about you. We all are. Worried about what? You're 25 and you've isolated yourself from the family. You work all the time, you don't date. You bought this huge house you can barely afford. I can afford it just fine. Can you? Really? Because Mom showed me your budget, and it's pretty tight. Mom doesn't know my budget. She doesn't know anything about my finances. She knows you're struggling. I'm not struggling. I'm building a life. By pushing everyone away? By setting boundaries. Leah was quiet for a moment, looking around the living room I'd decorated myself, at the furniture I'd bought with my own money, at the walls I'd painted on weekends. She loves you, you know? She loves controlling me. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the one trying to control everything. You can't handle anyone having a say in your life, so you're cutting them out one by one. She sold my car, Leah. She made a mistake. She committed a crime. She's our mother. And I'm an adult. We stared at each other across the coffee table, and I could see the exact moment when my sister made her choice. I can't support this, she said finally. I can't watch you destroy our family over pride. This isn't about pride. Then what is it about? My phone buzzed before I could answer. A text from Trinity. Hey, I know something about your mum. You deserve to know. I looked at Leah, who was waiting for my response, then at the message on my phone. It's about the truth. Trinity met me at a coffee shop downtown the next morning, sliding into the booth across from me with a manila folder clutched against her chest, like armor. I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, she said, without preamble. But after what happened with your car, what do you know? She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of photocopied documents. Remember when Grandma Rose died 3 years ago? Of course. Remember how your mum handled all the estate stuff? Said she'd take care of the paperwork so the rest of us didn't have to worry about it? I nodded. My grandmother had left a small inheritance, nothing huge but enough to matter. My mother had volunteered to be the executor, to handle all the legal details. She took out a loan against Grandma's house, before the will went through probate. Used Grandma's name and social security number. Trinity slid the first document across the table. It was a loan application for $15,000, dated 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral. The signature looked like my grandmother's handwriting, but something about it seemed off. How did you get this? My mum works at the bank. She saw it when they were processing the estate paperwork and made copies. She's been sitting on this for 3 years, not sure what to do. I stared at the signature. This is fraud. Gets worse. Trinity pulled out another document. She also opened a credit card in Grandma's name, maxed it out, buying furniture for her apartment. The credit card statement showed charges at furniture stores, department stores, even a vacation rental in Florida, all dated after my grandmother's death. Did anyone else know about this? Just my mum and me. And now you. Why didn't you report it? Trinity looked uncomfortable. Because she's family. Because my mum didn't want to be the one to destroy the family. Because we hoped she'd pay it back, and no one would ever have to know. Did she pay it back? Some of it. But Vada, there's more. She pulled out a third set of documents, and my blood went cold. Credit applications with my name on them, my social security number, my signature, or a pretty good forgery of it. She opened these 2 years ago, right around the time you bought your house. I looked at the dates. The applications were submitted 3 days after I'd added my mother to the deed. 3 days. How much? $12,000 in credit cards, a personal loan for $8,000. She's been making minimum payments, but the balances keep growing. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the statements. Charges for groceries, gas, clothing, restaurants. My mother had been living off credit cards opened in my name while lecturing me about financial responsibility. Trinity, this is identity theft. I know. I could have her arrested. I know. Why are you showing me this now? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because she called my mum last night. She's planning to take out a second mortgage on your house. Says she needs money for legal fees to fight your lawsuit. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too hot. She can't do that. I removed her from the deed. Did you? Because according to the county records, she's still listed as a co-owner. I pulled out my phone and called Talon. The deed transfer, is it final? Not yet. It takes 5 to 7 business days to process. Should be complete by Friday. She's trying to get a second mortgage before then. I'll call the mortgage company and put a hold on any new applications. But Vada, if she's committed identity theft, you need to report it. I hung up and looked at Trinity. I need copies of everything. Already made them. She handed me a second folder. Vada, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. It's not your fault, isn't it? I've been enabling this for 3 years. We all have. I gathered the documents and stood up. Not anymore. When I got home, I found my mother's car in my driveway and the front door standing wide open. I could hear voices from inside, my mother's and someone else's. I walked in to find her giving a tour to a middle-aged couple, gesturing around my living room like she was showing off her own home. And this is the main living area, she was saying. As you can see, it's very spacious, perfect for entertaining. Excuse me, I said loudly. What's going on here? My mother turned, and I saw a flash of panic cross her face before she composed herself. Vada, honey, these are the Hendersons. They're interested in renting the house. Renting what house? Our house. I thought since you're having financial difficulties, we could bring in some rental income. The couple looked between us uncertainly. Is there a problem? The woman asked. Yes, I said. This house isn't for rent, and this woman doesn't have the authority to rent it. I'm a co-owner, my mother said quickly. I have every right to make decisions about the property. Actually, you don't. I pulled out my phone and showed them the legal documents. This woman is being removed from the deed due to fraud. Any rental agreement she signs would be invalid. The Hendersons backed toward the door. "We'll call you later," the man said, and they practically ran to their car. My mother waited until they were gone before turning on me. "How dare you embarrass me like that? How dare you try to rent my house without telling me? I'm trying to save us both from financial ruin. By committing more fraud?" I pulled out Trinity's folder and spread the documents across my coffee table. "Like these credit cards you opened in my name, like the loan you took out using Grandma's identity?" She went completely still, staring at the papers like they were evidence of murder. "Where did you get those? Does it matter? Those are private documents. They're criminal documents, and tomorrow morning I'm taking them to the police." "You wouldn't. Watch me." She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking older than her 53 years. "Vada, you don't understand. I was desperate. After your father left, after I lost my job, I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked for help. I did ask. I asked you to add me to the deed so I'd have security. I asked you to let me help with decisions so I'd feel useful. You asked me to enable your theft. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did. And now you're trying to mortgage my house to pay for lawyers to fight me in court." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to sign the quitclaim deed. I want you to pay back the money you stole, and I want you to leave me alone." "And if I don't?" I picked up the folder of evidence. "Then I'll see you in court, both civil and criminal." My mother left without signing anything, but she forgot her purse on my kitchen counter. Inside, I found something that made my stomach drop. A folder of letters rubber-banded together, all addressed to her in my father's handwriting. The return address was from Nevada. My father, who I'd been told wanted nothing to do with us after the divorce, had been writing to my mother for years. I opened the first letter, dated 6 months ago. "Vivian, I'm asking you again to let me see the girls. Vada is an adult now, and Leah has her own family. They deserve to know the truth about why I left. You can't keep using them as weapons forever." I sat down hard at my kitchen table and opened another letter. "I never abandoned my daughters. I left you. There's a difference, and you know it. Stop telling them I don't care. Stop intercepting my attempts to contact them. They're not children anymore." And another. "I've been sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts for 7 years. If they're not receiving them, that's on you. I have the receipts. I have the tracking numbers. I know you're keeping them from my girls." My hands were shaking as I read through letter after letter. My father hadn't abandoned us. He'd been trying to reach us for years, and my mother had been intercepting everything. I called Trinity immediately. "I need my dad's phone number." "What? Why?" "Because my mother's been lying to me for 7 years." "Vada, what are you talking about?" "She's been keeping letters from him. Presents. He's been trying to contact Leah and me this whole time." Trinity was quiet for a moment. "I wondered about that. Uncle Nelson always asked about you girls at family gatherings. He seemed sad." "You've seen him?" "At my mum's birthday party last year, and at Christmas." "He always asks if we've heard from you." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mum said he didn't want contact. She said he'd moved on with his new life and didn't want reminders of his old family." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. She lied about everything. "Do you want me to get his number from my mom?" "Yes." "And Trinity? Can you ask him to meet me somewhere?" "Somewhere my mother won't know about?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a diner across town, waiting for a man I hadn't seen since I was 18. When he walked through the door, I recognized him immediately. Older, greyer, but still my dad. He spotted me and stopped, his face cycling through surprise, joy, and something that looked like relief. "Vada?" "Hi, Dad." He slid into the booth across from me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. "You look so much like your grandmother," he said finally. "I found your letters." His face darkened. "She kept them?" "All of them, in her purse. I don't think she meant for me to see them." 7 years, he said quietly. 7 years I've been trying to reach you and Leah. She told us you didn't want to see us, that you'd started a new family and forgotten about your old one. I never remarried. I never had other children. You and Leah are my only family." The waitress came over, and we ordered coffee neither of us wanted, just to have something to do with our hands. "Why did you leave?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the parking lot. "Your mother, she's sick, Vada. Not physically, but mentally. She needs to control everything and everyone around her. When you and Leah were little, I thought it was just her being protective. But as you got older, what happened? She started using you girls as leverage. If I disagreed with her about anything, she threatened to keep you from me. If I wanted to take you somewhere she didn't approve of, suddenly you were too busy, or didn't want to go. She made me the bad guy in every situation. So you left. I left her? I never wanted to leave you." He pulled out his wallet and showed me a photo, Leah and me at my high school graduation, taken from across the parking lot. I was there. I've been to every graduation, every important event I could find out about. I just had to watch from a distance. She told us you didn't care. I've cared every single day for 7 years. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the birthday presents he'd sent that never arrived, the Christmas cards that were returned to sender, the phone calls that went straight to voicemail. He'd hired a lawyer once to try to establish visitation rights, but since Leah and I were adults, there was nothing legally he could do if we didn't want to see him. "I thought you hated me," he said. "Your mother told me you blamed me for the divorce, that you never wanted to see me again. I thought you hated us? Never. Not for 1 second. When we finally said goodbye, he hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I just wish I could have been there to see it happen." Driving home, I felt like I was seeing my entire childhood through a different lens. Every story my mother had told me, every explanation for why my father wasn't around, every reason she'd given for his absence, all lies. When I got home, my mother was waiting in my driveway again. "We need to talk," she said. "Yes, we do. I've been thinking about what you said, about the quitclaim deed, and I'll sign it, but I want something in return." I looked at her standing there, trying to negotiate even now, trying to maintain some control over a situation that had already spiraled completely out of her hands. "What do you want?" "I want you to drop the criminal charges. I want you to promise you won't go to the police about the credit cards. And if I don't agree? Then I'll fight you in court. I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of daughter sues her own mother." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I'd been recording our conversation. "You just confessed to identity theft. Again, on tape." Her face went white. "You can't use that." "Actually, I can. This is a one-party consent state." "Vada, please." "I'm your mother." "No," I said quietly. "You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. My mother wouldn't steal from me. My mother wouldn't lie to me about my father for 7 years. My mother wouldn't try to steal my house. I gave birth to you, and I've been paying for that mistake ever since." I walked toward my front door, leaving her standing in the driveway. "I'm having a family dinner tomorrow night," I called over my shoulder. 7 o'clock. You're invited." "So is everyone else." "What family dinner?" "The one where we're going to tell the truth. All of it." I spent all day Saturday preparing. I made lasagna, my grandmother's recipe, and set the dining room table for 8. Leah arrived first with her husband Marcus, looking nervous. "What's this really about?" she asked, helping me carry dishes from the kitchen. "You'll see." Trinity came next, followed by my father. Leah nearly dropped the salad bowl when she saw him. "Dad?" "Hello, sweetheart." They hugged awkwardly while Marcus stood there looking confused. "I thought your dad was out of the picture." "So did I," Leah said, staring at me. "Vada, what's going on?" "We're having a family meeting, a real one this time." Holden arrived with Talon, who looked uncomfortable being at a family dinner, but had agreed to come as my witness. Monica showed up with my mother, both of them dressed like they were attending a funeral. "This is quite the gathering," my mother said, eyeing my father with barely concealed hostility. "I wasn't aware we were inviting strangers." "He's not a stranger," I said. "He's my father, your ex-husband, the man you've been lying about for 7 years. The room went quiet. Marcus pulled out his phone like he was considering calling an Uber. "Everyone sit down," I said. "We're going to eat dinner, and then we're going to have a conversation." The meal was tense. My mother kept shooting looks at my father, who was trying to make small talk with Leah about her job. Trinity pushed food around her plate without eating. Monica kept checking her phone like she was expecting an escape call. Finally, I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I'd arranged several folders. "Before we start, I want everyone to understand something. This isn't about forgiveness. This isn't about making amends. This is about truth." I opened the first folder and pulled out the quitclaim deed. "Mum, you've been telling everyone that I'm trying to steal your house, but this house was never yours." I held up the deed. "I bought it. I paid for it. I added your name because you manipulated me into thinking it was for safety." "Vada, I'm not finished." I opened the second folder. "You also told everyone that Dad abandoned us, that he didn't care about his daughters, that he moved on and forgot about us." I pulled out the stack of letters and set them on the table. "These are letters from Dad to you. 7 years worth. He's been trying to contact Leah and me this entire time, and you've been intercepting everything." Leah reached for one of the letters, her face pale. "Is this true?" My father nodded. "I never stopped trying to reach you girls. You said he didn't want to see us," Leah said to our mother. "You said he told you to leave him alone. I was protecting you." "From what?" I demanded. "From having a relationship with our father. From being disappointed again. From getting your hopes up. That wasn't your choice to make." I opened the third folder and pulled out Trinity's evidence. "And then there's this. Credit cards opened in my name. A loan taken out using Grandma Rose's identity after she died. Identity theft. Fraud." Monica started to stand up. "I think I should go." "Sit down," I said firmly. "You helped her sell my car. You're part of this." "I was just helping a friend. You were helping her commit a crime." I pulled out my phone and opened the recording from yesterday. "And yesterday, she tried to negotiate with me. Said she'd sign the quitclaim deed if I agreed not to press charges for the identity theft." I played the recording. My mother's voice filled the room, clear as day, admitting to the credit cards, the fraud, the manipulation. When it finished, the silence was deafening. "You recorded me?" my mother whispered. "You confessed to multiple felonies. I'm your mother. You're a criminal who happens to be related to me." Leah was crying now, still holding one of Dad's letters. "All these years, I thought he didn't want to see me." "I wanted to see you every day," Dad said quietly. "I tried everything I could think of." "Why didn't you try harder?" Marcus asked. "Why didn't you just show up?" "I did. Your mother called the police and said I was harassing her. I was served with a restraining order." "That's not true," my mother said. I pulled out another document from the folder. "Actually, it is. I found the restraining order paperwork in your bedroom drawer. You filed it to keep him away, then told us he didn't want to see us." My mother looked around the table at all the faces staring at her. Her daughters, her ex-husband, her best friend, strangers who now knew her secrets. "Everything I did was to protect this family." "No," I said. "Everything you did was to control this family, to make yourself the center of everyone's universe, to make us all dependent on you. I sacrificed everything for you girls. You sacrificed us for yourself." I walked back to the counter and picked up the final folder. "There's more. Monica, did you know my mother asked you to help sell my furniture too, not just the car?" Monica's face went red. "She said you were moving out." "I never said I was moving out." "She was planning to sell everything I owned and claim it was for my own good." I pulled out screenshots of Facebook messages between my mother and Monica, planning to sell my dining room set, my couch, even my bedroom furniture. She was going to strip my house bare and tell me it was because I couldn't handle adult responsibilities. "That's enough," my mother said, standing up abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Actually, you do. Because tomorrow morning, I'm filing a police report for identity theft, fraud, and forgery, and I'm pressing charges." "You wouldn't dare." "I already have. Talon filed the paperwork this afternoon. My mother turned to look at the lawyer, who nodded confirmation. The police will probably want to interview everyone who was involved. That includes you, Monica. Monica grabbed her purse and bolted for the door without another word. My mother stared at me across the dining room table, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, fear. You're destroying this family. No, Mum, I'm saving what's left of it. She walked around the table toward me, and for a moment I thought she might try to hug me, might try one last manipulation. Instead, she slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. I touched my cheek where her hand had connected, feeling the sting, tasting blood where my teeth had cut my lip. Get out of my house! This is my house too. I pulled the signed quitclaim deed from the folder and held it up. Not anymore. I had you removed from the deed yesterday. This house is mine, only mine. She stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. You can't. I live here. You visit here. And you're no longer welcome. She looked around the room one more time, at her daughters, her ex-husband, the lawyer, the witnesses to her downfall. You'll regret this, she said finally. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to do it. She walked to the door, then turned back. Don't come crying to me when your life falls apart. I won't. The door slammed behind her, and suddenly the house felt bigger, quieter, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. The silence after my mother left stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Leah was still crying, clutching Dad's letters. Marcus had his arm around her, looking like he'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. Well, Trinity said finally. That was intense. Is everyone okay? Holden asked, looking around the table. No, Leah said through her tears. Nothing about this is okay. She stood up abruptly, still holding the letters. Vada, I need to understand something. You've known about Dad trying to contact us, and you didn't tell me. I found out yesterday, and you decided to ambush everyone with it tonight. I decided to stop letting her control the narrative. By destroying our family? Our family was already destroyed, Leah. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Dad cleared his throat. Leah, sweetheart, I know this is overwhelming. Don't. She held up her hand. I can't. I need time to process this. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Marcus followed, pausing to look back at me. This is going to take a while to sort out, he said quietly. But for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. After they left, Trinity helped me clear the table, while Dad and Holden sat in the living room, making awkward small talk. Talon had excused himself right after my mother left, probably relieved to escape the family drama. How are you feeling? Trinity asked, loading dishes into the dishwasher. Empty, but not in a bad way. Like when you clean out a closet that's been stuffed with junk for years. She's going to fight the charges. Let her. The evidence is overwhelming. And Leah? I looked toward the living room where Dad was showing Holden pictures on his phone. Probably all the moments he'd missed, all the events he'd watched from a distance. Leah will come around. She needs time to be angry, and that's okay. She has a right to be angry. At you. At all of us. At Mom for lying, at Dad for not fighting harder, at me for keeping secrets even for a day, at herself for not questioning the story sooner. Trinity nodded. What about your mum? What happens now? Now she faces the consequences of her choices, just like the rest of us. The next morning, I woke up in my house, only mine, to the sound of my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. This is Tyler. I bought your Honda from your mum. Heard there might be legal issues? I still have the car if you want to work something out. I called him immediately. How much do you want for it? I paid $6,500. I'll take $6,500. Deal. Can you bring it by today? Already on my way. An hour later, my car was back in my driveway. Tyler turned out to be a college kid who'd heard about the drama through Facebook and felt bad about the whole situation. He even refused to take any extra money for his trouble. Family stuff is complicated, he said. handing me my keys. I'm glad it worked out. Dad called while I was sitting in my car, just enjoying having it back. I wanted to thank you for last night, for giving me a chance to explain. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have kept those letters to yourself. Used them as ammunition against your mother without bringing me into it. I thought about it, but you didn't. You gave me a chance to see my daughters again, even though it complicated your situation. It was the right thing to do. Your grandmother would be proud of you, you know. She always said you had her backbone. I wish she could have met the person I became, instead of the kid I was. She knew. Trust me, she knew. That afternoon, Holden helped me change the locks on my house. We didn't talk much while we worked, but when we finished, he sat down on my front steps. So what now? Now I figure out what my life looks like without her in it. Scared? Relieved? Good. You should be. My phone rang. Leah. I've been thinking about everything, she said without preamble. About the letters, about Dad, about what Mum did to you. And I'm still angry, but not at you. Well, not mostly at you. I can live with mostly. I want to see Dad again, properly this time. Maybe we could all have dinner again, but without the dramatic revelations. I'd like that. And Vada, I'm sorry I didn't believe you about Mom. I should have seen what she was doing. She's good at hiding it. Not anymore. The police called that evening. My mother had been arrested for identity theft and fraud. She'd posted bail and was scheduled for arraignment next week. Monica was being questioned as an accessory. Will you be pressing charges for the car as well? The detective asked. No, I got the car back. The identity theft is enough. Fair enough. We'll be in touch about testimony. I hung up and walked through my house, really looking at it for the first time in months. The furniture I'd bought with my own money, the walls I'd painted, the mortgage I'd been paying alone while being told I couldn't handle adult responsibilities. It was quiet, peaceful, mine. I made myself dinner and ate it at my dining room table, the same table where I'd confronted my mother, where I'd watched her world crumble under the weight of her own lies. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Dinner next Sunday? Just the three of us? I typed back, yes, but I'm cooking. Looking forward to it. I set my phone aside and finished my meal in silence. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my yard, my house, my life. For the first time in 25 years, everything I owned actually belonged to me. The silence was beautiful. I cleaned up my dishes, locked my doors, and went to bed in my own house, knowing that when I woke up tomorrow, no one would be there who didn't belong. If that house was all anyone wanted from me, let them remember I built this life alone, and I'd keep building it, one boundary at a time.
My name is Lauren Ellison. I was raised in a family that celebrated appearances more than character. My father, Colonel Robert Ellison, served 30 years in the Army, with medals lined up like trophies on the living room wall. My sister, Vanessa. She knew how to shine bright, loud, and always center stage. And me, I was the quiet one, the invisible one, the one who got asked to take the photo, never be in it. That night we were gathered for what Vanessa called Dad's legacy dinner, a formal celebration marking his retirement. Long banquet table linen napkins, catered roast beef, every chair filled with family friends and his old military buddies. I was seated at the end near the window. On purpose, I think. When I brought in the salad, yes, I'd volunteered to make it. Vanessa looked up, laughed lightly, and said just loud enough Lauren's still trying to save the world with spinach and petri dishes. Some people chuckled. Dad didn't say a word. I didn't flinch. Because I knew something they didn't. The front door opened. A gust of night air swept into the room. Every head turned. And then came the voice. Calm. Commanding. Dr. Lauren Ellison, the man said, stepping into full view, in full uniform. On behalf of Colonel Davis and the Joint Defense Directorate, we thank you for your work. We are ready for your review. A fork hit the floor. My sister stopped smiling. I stood up slowly, and suddenly, no one was laughing anymore. before you hear the whole story behind that moment. If you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. I used to think silence was safety. As a child, I learned quickly that the quieter I was, the less trouble I caused. Vanessa thrived on praise dance recitals, debate trophies homecoming queen. Every wall in our house had a photo of her winning something. Me, I once got a certificate for a middle school science fair and found it buried in a kitchen drawer next to expired coupons. It wasn't that I didn't try, I just didn't shine the way they wanted. While Vanessa charmed crowds, I spent hours in the backyard sketching pollination patterns, building solar heaters from soda cans, and collecting soil samples for fun. I talked about microbial resistance at dinner once. My mother blinked, then asked Vanessa how her cheer competition had gone. My father cleared his throat and told me to ease up on the science stuff, no one at the table's writing a dissertation. So I stopped talking about what I loved. But I didn't stop doing it. In high school, I stayed late in the lab after everyone else left. I applied to college without telling them until I'd already been accepted with a scholarship. When I told Dad I'd be leaving for MIT in the fall, he said, "Why so far? Don't they teach science here too?" By then, I'd learned to swallow my disappointment like aspirin bitter, necessary, and taken alone. Vanessa stayed close to home, launched a lifestyle brand that mostly involved promoting things she didn't use. But she had followers, she had attention. That was enough for our parents. I, on the other hand, disappeared into academia, then research. Then, finally, a classified project through the Department of Defense, partnering with environmental labs to develop agricultural technologies for arid regions, technology that could feed troops stationed in remote locations, and later civilian populations. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Still, I didn't tell them. I stopped sharing my life updates in the family group chat when I realized no one read them. My messages were always marked as seen, but never replied to. They only texted when they needed something help with a paper Vanessa was ghostwriting for her brand's eco initiative, a contact for someone at the USDA. Never a call to say they were proud. Never a, "Hey, what are you working on these days?" I wasn't angry, just tired. You can only knock on a locked door so many times before you walk away. So I built a different door. At 32, I was the youngest research fellow to co-lead a joint ops science initiative funded by military and civilian grants. I had a team, a lab, and real impact, but no one in my family knew. I let them believe I was still just doing lab stuff. Let them mock my little garden experiments. I let them underestimate me, because I didn't need their applause. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. The last time I saw my father before the dinner, he asked if I was still working in that windowless basement. He chuckled. Vanessa laughed too. I nodded, because what they didn't know was that basement was now a facility with 3 wings, 2 patents, and a pending commendation from the very institution my father had once given his life to serve. And that commendation, it was about to walk through their front door. The invitation came via group text. Vanessa had started the thread, tagging everyone like she was hosting a reality show. Ellison family formal dinner for Dad's retirement. Saturday, 6 p.m. sharp. Dress nice. Let's make it a night worth remembering. No one asked if I was available. I stared at the message for a while before replying a simple, "I'll be there." No emojis, no fanfare. A few minutes later, Vanessa responded, "Awesome. Maybe wear something." Festive this time, since I didn't answer. Truthfully, I hadn't planned on going. I'd just finished a 10-day field test in Arizona and still had red dust in the hem of my jeans. My body was sore, my inbox overflowing, but something in me itched at the timing. The way she framed it, a night to remember. And it was time. Time to stop hiding. Not to prove anything, just to stand there and not shrink. When I arrived at my parents' house that Saturday, everything looked the same. The hedges were still too perfectly trimmed. The brass eagle on the front door still gleamed like it had its own duty roster. I parked at the curb and sat in the car for a full minute before stepping out. Inside the living room had been transformed. White tablecloths, gold napkin rings, oversized framed photo of Dad in full uniform, his medals polished, his smile frozen in time. Vanessa greeted me like a pageant queen. "Lauren, you made it. Didn't think dirt and petri dishes would let you go for a night." The guests around her laughed politely. I smiled. The dirt managed just fine without me. She air-kissed the air near my cheek and turned back to her group. Most of them were Dad's old army friends, gray hair, straight backs, decades of protocol woven into their posture. A few looked at me with vague familiarity, the way one might look at a forgotten cousin at a funeral. Dinner was plated by a caterer. My name card was at the far end of the table, 2 seats away from the restroom. Vanessa sat at Dad's right hand. Mom floated between the kitchen and her wine glass. The conversation was mostly war stories and real estate talk. Someone asked Vanessa about her latest product line, and she launched into a speech about collagen-infused hydration pouches. "Lauren's into science," she added, glancing down the table. "She does, sustainability stuff, composting microbugs." She tried to explain it once, but I just nodded. More laughter. I didn't say a word. Dad clinked his glass for attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 30 years in uniform is a lifetime. I've seen combat command and change, but nothing compares to seeing family carry on tradition." He looked at Vanessa and she beamed. I stared at my plate. Fork, knife, napkin. Then I felt it. A shift in the air, a car pulling up, doors closing, footsteps, then the knock. Firm, intentional. When the door opened and a man in full military dress stepped inside, the entire room turned. But he wasn't looking for my father. He was looking for me. The moment his boots crossed the threshold, the air snapped like a taut wire. The man was tall, mid-50s, maybe his posture impossibly straight, his ribbons and insignia sharp against the deep navy of his formal uniform. He didn't knock twice. He didn't smile. He stepped inside with the calm weight of someone used to silence when he entered a room. At first, no one said anything. Vanessa blinked rapidly, clearly trying to place him. Dad stood halfway up, then hesitated. One hand braced on the back of his chair. His eyes scanned the uniform, froze at the shoulder tabs. A full-bird colonel, active duty. But this man wasn't here for him. Dr. Lauren Ellison, the officer, said, voice cutting clean through the room. I stood slowly. "Colonel Davis sends his personal regards," he continued. "We've just returned from Sector Delta. Your irrigation deployment protocols held through the entire dry cycle. Not a single loss of yield. Our personnel wanted to deliver their thanks. In person. Your presence is requested at Joint Defense Command." You could have heard a pin drop. Behind me, someone's fork hit the floor with a soft clatter. Mom's wine glass tilted in her hand but didn't fall. Dad was still halfway out of his seat now, frozen completely. Vanessa. God, Vanessa looked like someone had unplugged her. Her smile collapsed. Her mouth opened, then closed again like she'd swallowed a lemon. The colonel stepped forward, 1 pace heels sharp against the hardwood. Then he saluted. A crisp, perfect salute. To me. And before anyone could blink, I returned it. The training came back faster than I expected. I wasn't military, not officially, but I'd been embedded long enough. I'd been taught how to stand, how to speak, how to respond when respect was offered. But no one else in that room had ever offered me any. Now a man wearing the same bars my father once did was giving it without hesitation. Your file has been advanced, the colonel said, lowering his hand. Final commendation approval is pending. You'll be notified within the week. In the meantime, command would like a full debriefing. Transport is waiting. I nodded once. Understood. I looked around the room. No one moved. No one breathed. Vanessa finally found her voice. Wait, what is this? What file? What is he talking about? I turned to her. My voice was calm. You remember that compost project you joked about? It's now a multi-phase food security protocol being tested in 4 combat zones. We just stopped an entire region from going into ration lockdown. She opened her mouth again, but Dad interrupted. You never told us. You never said you were working with defense. I met his eyes for the first time all night. You never asked. He flinched. Just slightly. But I saw it. I thought you were wasting my time, hiding in basements. I said it gently without heat. Turns out basements grow things, like solutions, like legacy. The colonel glanced at his watch. Dr. Ellison. I gave a small nod and stepped away from the table. My napkin still folded perfectly, my plate untouched. No one followed me. At the door, the colonel opened it for me. Before I stepped out, I turned one last time toward the room. Dad still hadn't sat down. Vanessa was clutching her necklace like it could anchor her to the floor. "I'll be back later," I said softly. "Maybe, if I feel like dinner." Then I stepped out into the night. The car waiting at the curb was matte black, government issued. The driver opened the door without a word. I slid into the back seat, the leather cool against my skin, the silence deep and satisfying. As we pulled away from the house, I glanced once over my shoulder. No one was watching from the windows. They were probably still sitting there, trying to rewrite the last 5 minutes in their heads. But no rewrite could undo what they'd just seen. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the backup daughter, the invisible one. I felt seen, respected, undeniable. The drive to base took 30 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime separating me from the house I'd just left. I sat in silence staring out the window as the city lights faded into the muted lines of the access road. I didn't speak, and neither did the colonel. He knew. Some truths don't need narration. When we arrived at Joint Defense Command, the gates opened like they'd been waiting for me. Inside, the world was clean, efficient. No backhanded compliments, no seat assignments that meant know your place. Just credentials, clearance, and work that spoke for itself. The debrief ran late into the night. They asked about nutrient uptake in extreme aridity, microbial drift rates, frost-limited germination. Every answer I gave was mine, not something memorized, not something borrowed. My mind was no longer a place I had to shrink to survive. Here, it had room. At the end of the session, Colonel Davis himself walked in. He didn't salute. He didn't make a speech. He simply held out a box the size of a small book. Inside, a Defense Innovation Medal, Civilian Class, Level 1, Rare. I think he said less than 50 had been awarded in the past decade. I read the report myself, he said. "You didn't just save crops, you saved lives." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Your father served with honor," he added more gently now. "But that what you did, Lauren, that's a different kind of valor. You didn't carry a weapon, but you made one obsolete." I didn't cry, not then. But I sat in the car afterward, medal still in my lap, and felt something unravel inside me. Not pain, not pride either. Something older, like silence finally letting go. The next morning, I didn't answer the flurry of texts. Vanessa's came first. "What just happened? Was that real? Why didn't you tell us?" Then, "Mom, Lauren, please call. Your father's shaken." And then, after hours of "Nothing, Dad. Proud of you. Should have said it sooner." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I needed it, but because I used to. When you grow up invisible, you learn to crave recognition like oxygen. But standing in that briefing room, medal in hand, flanked by people who saw me not as someone's daughter, but as someone who mattered on her own, I realized something. Their silence no longer defined me. Their laughter, their dismissal, even their apologies. None of it had the power to erase what I'd built when no one was looking. At home, I pinned the medal not to a wall, but inside my office drawer, next to an old photo of me as a kid, knee-deep in the backyard garden, covered in dirt, holding a clump of roots like treasure. No one had clapped for that girl, but she had kept going anyway. And now the world was clapping, quietly, but loud enough for her to hear. A week passed before I returned to the lab. When I walked through the doors of the field station, the smell of damp earth and metal hit me like memory. Tara was in the greenhouse, running temperature checks. Micah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 3 open tablets, swiping through soil data like he was solving a crime. They looked up as I entered, both startled. "You okay?" Micah asked. I nodded. "Did the dinner go badly?" Tara ventured. I smiled faintly. "Let's just say it went differently. They didn't press. That's why they're my team. Not because they're brilliant, though they are, but because they know silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's a shield." I spent that morning checking crop plots, noting growth curves, recalibrating pH ranges. The numbers made sense. The plants didn't judge. And in that rhythm, I found calm. Later that day, I walked alone to the far field, where the test beds met the wild grass line. There, half sunk in the soil, was a small wooden bench, built years ago by me out of scrap. I used to sit there after failed experiments, watching the horizon, and wondering if the work would ever matter. Now I sat with something else entirely. Peace. I pulled out a small black notebook from my coat pocket, the same kind I'd used when I was 10, scribbling theories about bees and root systems. Inside this one were field notes, grant ideas, and a quote from my first mentor at the Defense Initiative: "If the world won't listen, grow louder in the dirt." I flipped to a blank page and began sketching a new idea: mobile crop pods for regions with high conflict displacement. Not for glory, not for medals, just because someone needed them. The sun was dipping low when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a woman standing at the edge of the field, shoulders tense, hands clenched around a tote bag. Vanessa. She wasn't in makeup this time. Her usual heels had been replaced by flat shoes that sank slightly into the soft ground. She looked smaller somehow. I stood but didn't speak. She approached slowly. "I came to see it. The place. What you've built." I motioned toward the greenhouse in the distance. "It's open. You can walk through." She did, quietly. No comments, no jokes. Just eyes that moved over solar panels, nutrient tanks, kids' drawings taped to the education wing. When she returned, she looked at me differently. "I used to think you were the weird one," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "But I watched one of your students explain carbon sequestration to his mom," she added. He looked proud. I nodded. "He should be." Vanessa looked down. "I didn't come to fix anything. I just wanted to see what I'd never bothered to ask about." I let the silence sit between us like a fragile bridge. "Thanks," I said at last. And that was enough. She turned to leave. The wind picked up, dry but not empty, and beneath my boots the soil remembered. 6 months passed. I didn't go back to my parents' house, and they didn't ask me to. A text came once from Mom forwarding a newspaper clipping when my name appeared in a defense journal. No caption, no comment. Just the article as if to say, "We saw it." That's enough? It wasn't. But it also didn't matter anymore. The medal still lived in my drawer between lab notebooks and soil sample logs. I didn't need it on a wall. Just knowing it was there was enough. Proof that the work mattered. That I did. The lab grew. We added 2 new research plots and expanded the student program. Kids came in quiet, nervous, unsure of their own thoughts. Months later, they argued confidently over soil acidity and water retention rates like their voices belonged in the room. And Vanessa kept showing up. She never said sorry, not once, but she brought granola bars for the kids, stayed late to clean up after workshops, helped 2 students prep for a grant pitch, coaching them through stage fright like it was second nature. The students called her Coach V. One afternoon, she handed me a folder. "For the shy ones," she said. Inside were worksheets: how to explain ideas clearly, how to stand without shrinking, how to breathe through doubt. The writing wasn't perfect, but it was real. I used them in the next youth training. Our parents didn't come to the year-end showcase. They sent a card. No message, just my name on the front, spelled right this time. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to. That night, I walked out to the far end of the property, to the bench I'd built years ago before the research. Before the grants, before anyone had paid attention. I sat down with my old notebook in my lap. The same kind I carried everywhere when I was a kid. Pages, worn corners, curled, still smelling faintly of earth. On a blank page, I wrote one sentence. "Let them laugh. Just keep growing." The wind moved through the wheat field in soft waves. The sky above me was wide and quiet. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone who'd been dismissed and finally proved her worth. I just felt like myself. Whole, unapologetic, free. My name is Elise Warren. I'm 36 years old, and as of this morning, I was just another no-name recruit standing on the gravel of Echo Valley Training Base. No insignia, no file history, just boots still carrying dust from a different life. He stood above us like he always had, Colonel Victor Warren, my father. Clipboard in hand, whistle tight around his neck, posture sharp, as if he were carved from command itself. He scanned the new intake list, found my name, and paused just long enough for my breath to hitch. Then he laughed, loud, dry, deliberate. This one, he said, voice cutting through the ranks. Unfit for service. Some of the younger cadets chuckled, confused. The older ones glanced away. Nobody corrected him. Nobody moved. The silence after that kind of sentence is worse than the words themselves, because it means everyone believed him. But I didn't flinch, because I wasn't there to earn his respect. I'd given up chasing that ghost years ago. I was there because this place, this unit, this system, had once written my obituary and filed it under classified. I was there because someone needed to walk into the house of rot and tear out the blueprint bolt by bolt. And he, my father, was still standing at the center of it. By sundown, the man who mocked me in front of every recruit on that field would be standing beside his commanding officer saluting me. Not because he wanted to, but because structure demanded it. And that moment, that single salute, would be the first crack in the wall he spent his whole life building. He just didn't know it yet. But I did. And I'd been preparing for it longer than he ever cared to notice. Wanda? Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. The wind at Echo Valley always carried a strange weight. Half dust, half expectation. It scraped against your skin like something you weren't supposed to question. That morning, the gravel crunched beneath my boots as I lined up with the rest of a Bravo unit eyes, forward spine stiff every inch of me, pretending I belonged there. But I didn't. Not really. I'd forged my way back into the system with a clearance code Tyson Rowe smuggled through channels so obscure even he couldn't retrace them. On paper, I was a policy liaison and internal observer assigned to monitor command cohesion during the new Tier 4 integrations. It sounded like a spreadsheets job. That was the point. Let them think I was harmless. Only General Rowe knew who I really was. And even he didn't know everything. I had stepped into Echo Valley not to participate, but to infiltrate. Not to train, but to watch the trainers. And standing there in that formation, I realized how good they'd become at burying the truth. The drills were sharp, the cadets efficient. But the fear beneath the obedience, it was still there. Same flavor, different packaging. Bravo unit wasn't where you were sent to grow. It was where they put you when they wanted you to give up. Our instructor, Sergeant Hallen, spoke with a voice like unfinished sandpaper. He called cadence without looking at us. He threw orders like scraps, testing who would grab first. Behind his bark, I could hear the real intention disruption. Uncertainty. He wanted us unbalanced, off rhythm, easy to fracture. I stayed quiet. I always had. That's how you survive long enough to find the source. By noon, I'd memorized every name in my unit. The kid from New Mexico who blinked too often. The woman with perfect posture and haunted eyes. And him, Jordan Fisk, the one who'd already marked me as prey. He watched me not like I was suspicious, but like I didn't matter. That was more dangerous. Dismissal always is. After lunch, we were assigned pairs for simulation drills. Jordan grinned when they put us together. "You sure you're not supposed to be behind a desk?" he muttered under his breath as we entered the ring. "You walk like someone who's only read about war." I didn't answer. We circled once, twice. He lunged first, sloppy but fast. I let him connect just enough to build his confidence. Then, with a shift of weight and one silent step, I dropped him. Not violently, not dramatically. Just enough to land him hard and fast, his breath knocked out, and his ego scattered. But it wasn't that moment that cracked the silence. It was what came next. As he scrambled up, his hand snagged my collar. The back of my shirt stretched, exposing the edge of ink black. Sharp, precise. The emblem of Ghost Vortex. Someone gasped. Tyson Rowe, passing behind the ring, with a clipboard, froze mid-stride. He didn't speak. Not at first. Just stared, eyes locking with mine like he was seeing a ghost. Then, slowly, deliberately, he removed his cap. The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was reverent. "We salute her," he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And in that moment, 100 cadets, who didn't know my name, straightened their spines. Even the wind stilled. My father standing nearby looked like someone had kicked the ground out from under him. But I didn't look at him. Not yet. They saw the tattoo. They saw General Rowe pause salute and say my presence out loud. What they didn't see was everything that came before. They didn't see the day I was declared KIA, killed in action without a body. October 11th, 2015, northwest border of Takar. The report was filed in less than 24 hours, stamped sealed, vanished. It said I'd died saving diplomats during a failed extraction. Heroic, clean. What it didn't say, what it wasn't allowed to say, was that the blast was planted by someone inside our own command, that it was targeted, that it was meant to eliminate not just me, but what I knew. And what I knew was this ghost vortex was never meant to exist. Not officially. It was a black operations team built under the language of asymmetric reconnaissance. But halfway through its life, something changed. Orders started coming without attribution. Debriefs were redacted before we finished them. Intel didn't go to intelligence anymore. It went somewhere darker. I stayed because of one man, Commander Hal Falco. He trained us like people, not assets. Taught us to disobey when the orders reeked of politics. Taught us how to disappear when survival became rebellion. He died in the blast that was meant for me. I was pulled from the wreckage by a local shepherd boy. I should have bled out. Instead, I buried my insignia, cauterized my wound, and vanished off-grid for 7 months. No contact, no trail, just watching. When I surfaced again, I didn't come back to reclaim my rank. I came back to trace who signed my death certificate. The last name on that chain of command, Victor Warren. My father. Assigned less than 10 kilometers from the kill zone. He never asked for the body, never visited the site, never even flinched when they announced I was gone. I remember that part more clearly than the explosion. So no, I didn't come to Echo Valley to be a cadet again. I came to be forgotten on purpose. Because you can only dismantle a machine when it thinks you're part of the noise. So General Rowe was the only one who knew. He'd served with Falco in the early years. He was one of the few still standing who remembered what Ghost Vortex had been before it was repurposed, before it was turned into a weapon without accountability. He met me at the helipad 2 weeks before I was assigned. No cameras, no paperwork, just 2 cups of bitter coffee and silence between words. "You'll work from Sector B," he said. "Policy observer, level 3 clearance, no higher." I nodded. "Don't engage. Don't tip your hand. They'll test you. They always do." He hesitated then. "No one can know who you were." "Not yet." "I'm not here for recognition," I told him. "I'm here for pattern." He tilted his head. "And if that pattern leads back to him, it already does." He didn't argue. The barracks they gave me were in the oldest wing. Peeling walls, no surveillance. It suited me. I wasn't there to sleep. I was there to watch who saluted whom, who laughed too loud during drills, who disappeared after curfew without tripping motion sensors, because someone was rebuilding what Ghost Vortex used to be quietly, carefully inside Echo Valley. And the only way to find the architect was to blend into the scaffolding. So I did. One breath at a time, one silence at a time. And I waited. I didn't need long to see it. They'd buried the old structure beneath layers of bureaucracy and semantics, but the bones were still there. Rebranded, polished, disguised under names like Tier 4 isolation drills and resilience protocol evaluation. But I knew the language. I'd lived the real version before it wore logos. They weren't training soldiers here. They were rewiring obedience. It started with the simulation modules. Recruits were blindfolded, locked in soundproof crates, denied water under the guise of stress tolerance testing. I watched one drill where a cadet was told his entire unit had turned on him. The goal: observe whether he broke rank or begged for reintegration. He did both. And when he cried afterward, they called it data. The instructor behind that drill was Major Calendry Young, for his rank, clean-cut, sharp voice. Too sharp, like he'd practiced sounding like authority before ever earning it. I never confronted him. I just watched. Every command he issued was designed to fracture cohesion under pressure and reward silent compliance. Falco once said, "We don't train killers. We train conscience under fire." This wasn't that. I kept my face neutral. I filed mock reviews, policy memos, suggestions with no teeth. But I marked everything in a black notebook Rowe had given me and told me never to upload. Paper doesn't vanish like servers, he said. It survives betrayal. The shift came with Naomi Ellis. She was the top marksman in her cohort. Quiet, focused, the kind of recruit Falco would have watched with interest. Then, without warning, she failed her leadership module, cited for reckless endangerment of unit. Her evaluation file came redacted, an immediate flag. I found her behind the mess hall that night. She wasn't crying. She was staring at the dirt like it had answers. "They said I compromised my team," she whispered. "But I followed every protocol. Every damn one. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the failed scorecard. It was damp from being clenched too long. The ink had started to bleed. They won't even let me appeal. I said nothing, just opened my notebook and wrote her name, the date, the event, and signed it beneath hers. When she looked up, I added softly, "If they come for you again, hand them this page. Don't say anything else." She stared at it for a long moment. "Why are you helping me?" I didn't answer. Because how do you explain to someone that their story feels like a chapter stolen from your own, that their silence echoes a wound you've spent years stitching shut? The next day, she walked back into training with her shoulders squared. The other cadets noticed, especially Jordan Fisk, still sharp-eyed, still watching me. Later that week, I caught him tracing names into mashed potatoes at lunch. Not joking, not distracted, intentional. A code, a message. Someone else was communicating through food trays and sugar packets. It wasn't just Naomi. The manipulation was systemic, and whoever was running it, they were testing new doctrine with an old philosophy, break them down, then decide which ones to rebuild. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Ghost Vortex anymore. This was about the people who inherited its rot, and the ones trying to survive it. That night, I walked past Calendry's office. He didn't look up from his screen, but he paused his typing. He knew I'd seen too much. Good. So had I. They thought I didn't see it. The petty sabotage, the sideways glances, the boots that got swapped out for a size too small, the ammo crates I signed for that always came back missing rounds, the drills where orders changed mid-execution just to make me look incompetent. It wasn't random. It was a script. A slow, deliberate erosion. But I didn't protest. I logged it quietly, precisely. Every inconsistency, every false reprimand, every time someone called me ma'am with a sneer in their voice like they knew I didn't belong. What they didn't know was that I'd been through worse. Much worse. When your own father orchestrates your disappearance, nothing surprises you after that. Jordan Fisk was the first to shift. He'd mocked me in the beginning, cocky, fast, too young to understand the weight of hierarchy, but old enough to play its game. But after that simulation, where General Rowe saluted me, something in his posture changed. He didn't call me out in the yard anymore. He didn't laugh during drills. One afternoon, he cornered me outside the weapons maintenance bay. No swagger, no sarcasm. "I wasn't supposed to see this," he said, handing me a folded sheet. It was worn at the edges, creased down the middle, like it had been read too many times. I unfolded it slowly. My name was there, plain and sharp, Elise Warren. Unit designation, Ghost Vortex. Status presumed KIA, 2015. The document was from an internal server that no cadet should have had access to. There were redacted lines, coordinates, a notation subject's body unrecovered, memorial denied, mission archive sealed. I looked at him. His expression was unreadable. "You could be court-martialed for having this," I said. He shrugged. "I've been wondering for weeks why you walk like you've seen real fire, but flinch when people shout your name. Why General Rowe never corrects you. Now I know." There was silence between us. It wasn't awkward. It was earned. "You're not just here to observe," he added. "You're here to finish something." He wasn't wrong. I nodded once. This place is where it started. He didn't ask for more. He didn't need to. From that day on, he started passing me information quietly. A shift schedule left on my bunk. A training module altered mid-execution. A name whispered between formations. Not loyalty, alignment. Because when someone finally sees the weight, you carry not the rumors, not the whispers, but the real thing. They either step away or step closer. Jordan stepped closer, and so did Naomi. Her fire had settled into something colder, more deliberate. She stopped flinching in drills. She started watching like I watched, and one night she slipped me a note beneath my door. It was a list, names, dates, drills, failed scores, all redacted, all hers. Beneath it, one line in her handwriting, "How many others I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because I had what I came for, witnesses' records, and the first fracture in a system that once tried to erase me completely. But I wasn't ready to strike, not yet. Because in war, real war, you don't fire the first bullet when you're angry. You fire it when you know exactly what wall it will crack. And I was still drawing the blueprint. The folder came just after midnight. No signature, just a level 5 clearance stamp, and my name typed in the corner. I opened it carefully. It was a nomination: Elise Warren, advanced candidate for Phoenix Division. A new program built on Ghost Vortex doctrine. Evaluation passed. Stapled to the back was a second page, handwritten, denied, psychologically unfit for leadership. Signed Colonel Victor Warren. I didn't feel surprised, just still. This wasn't the first time. 12 years ago, I'd been handpicked by Falco for Project Dominion. I made top 3. Then I disappeared from the shortlist, no explanation. Back then, I thought maybe I broke. Maybe I was unstable. Now I had proof. Twice the same man had erased me. At jury 0500, I walked to his office. The halls were dim, the air stale with old wax and ego. I placed the folder directly in the center of his desk. Then I tore a page from my notebook, wrote one line. "This time, would you like to sign it yourself?" I left without knocking. No speech, no warning. Because silence, when returned, deliberately becomes its own indictment. 2 days passed, no response. But when he entered the command tent on the 3rd morning, something was different. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, like a man forced to face something he buried only to find it staring back. I didn't want his apology. I wanted visibility. I wanted those around him to start noticing the shift, the tension in his jaw, the clipboard that no longer sat comfortably in his grip. His authority had always relied on erasure. Now he couldn't erase me, not anymore. I'd returned the story he tried to bury, and whether he chose to end it or burn it again, that was his burden now. I just made sure he had to hold it. The day of the graduation was colder than usual. A gray sky stretched above the field as recruits lined up on the gravel boots, sharp backs straight. I stood at the back, no insignia, no name tag, just a shadow. They called out names, handed out commendations. I watched Fisher walk forward, eyes flicking briefly to where I stood. Then Megan, her steps, sure, her silence dignified. Finally, my father took the podium. His voice was steady, his posture perfect. "There's one file," he said, with no remarks, no commendation, no designation. Too vague to honor, too empty to acknowledge. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. The air locked still. I saw heads shift subtly, all glancing my way, before snapping back. "I have no statement about Advisor Warren," he finished, "so I won't make one." He stepped down, no applause, no dismissal, just absence. Then a movement. Lieutenant General Rourke stepped out from the side tent, slow, deliberate. He carried a red file in his hand. Its spine cracked, the seal nearly rubbed out. He didn't go to the mic. He walked past it, past the flags, past every layer of ceremony. He placed the file, my file, on the table. "There was once a unit that didn't exist," Rourke said. "Ghost Vortex. 6 operatives, no names, no graves, only outcomes." He paused. One returned, erased, disavowed, and still standing. He looked directly at me. Elise Warren led the final mission of Ghost Vortex. She was buried in a report. But she didn't stay dead. Then he saluted. A single motion, crisp and controlled. And slowly they followed. First Megan, then Fisher, then the instructors who once dismissed me, even the recruit who mocked my lack of rank. And last, though, it cost him my father. His hand rose not to me, but to what he could no longer deny. That the legacy he tried to erase had returned, and it now outranked him. After the field emptied, I returned to my quarters alone. There was no celebration, no promotion ceremony, no official change of station. Just a thin envelope under my door. Inside was a single photo, black and white edges curled with time. 2 cadets stood on a platform, my father and Commander Rourke, both young, both unsmiling. Rourke's hand rested on my father's shoulder. On the back, written in fine ink, were 9 words. He chose the wrong one back then. Not now. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. The next morning, my father was gone. His office cleared, his nameplate removed. No announcement followed. But for the first time, the file he tried to bury wasn't hidden anymore. It sat open on the command desk, visible to every recruit who walked by. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need an award. Because I hadn't come back for recognition. I came back so that no one else would be erased the way I was. Ghost Vortex no longer existed in secret. The silence had been broken, and in its place, something new would begin, not built on legacy, but on truth. I took nothing with me when I left the base. No badge, no stripes, just a notebook filled with names that deserved better. And a scroll handed to me quietly by Rourke that morning. Final Authorization Program Vortex officially closed. But I didn't see it as an ending. It was a release. Because what mattered most wasn't who saluted me that day. It was who finally saw me. The first time my parents banned me from their hotel, I was told to use the service entrance. "Important guests are arriving," the front desk manager said, without looking me in the eye. The Wexleys requested minimal disruption. I smiled just slightly. That important guest was their daughter Me, or rather the woman they still believed was nothing more than a failed consultant with lofty ideas and no real business experience. They didn't know I had been buying their empire one share at a time. My name is Serena Wexley, and 3 years ago I walked out of my family's boardroom after they laughed at my plan to modernize the company. They called me naive, trend-chasing. They said I didn't understand legacy. They were right in a way. I didn't understand why preserving a legacy meant rejecting innovation, or why being their daughter made my ideas less valuable than my brother's new dessert menu. So I stopped arguing. I started building. Tonight, as I stepped through the grand revolving doors of the Wexley Grand in downtown Chicago, no one recognized me. Not the greeter, not the concierge, not even the investors whose portfolios I had quietly reshaped over the past 2 years. They had no idea the majority shareholder of Wexley Heritage Hotels was already standing inside the lobby. They thought this night, this annual hospitality award ceremony, was theirs. A celebration of tradition, of Julian, of control. But I came for something else. Tonight wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about revenge either. It was about taking back what was already mine, publicly, irrevocably. And when the screens changed, when the old numbers flashed across the ballroom walls, and the logo dissolved into something newer, stronger, I would no longer be the forgotten daughter. I would be the empire. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. 3 years earlier, I had walked into the boardroom of Wexley Heritage Hotels, wearing a gray pantsuit and carrying a binder that had taken me 6 months to build. My presentation was polished. My models were accurate to the decimal. I had spent late nights researching AI integration, sustainable operations, and market-driven personalization for upscale guests. I didn't come in asking for a title. I didn't want an inheritance or a spotlight. All I wanted was a seat at the table and a chance to evolve what my grandfather had once called a living organism, not a monument. But my father had barely skimmed the first slide. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning beneath his weight, and said, "Serena, these ideas aren't for a legacy business like ours. We're not some Silicon Valley startup. We have history." My mother sipped her espresso and added, "You're not really a hotelier, darling. You're a consultant." That's a very different thing. I looked at Julian, my brother, their golden boy, hoping he might offer something resembling support. But he just smirked and twirled a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. That was the last time I spoke in that boardroom. They didn't fire me. That would have been too direct. They simply removed me from all planning communications, cut off my access to internal systems, and stopped inviting me to strategy sessions. Slowly, elegantly, they erased me. So I left. Not in anger, in clarity. I moved to Seattle and took every contact I had, tech investors, boutique hotel operators, even an old professor who'd mentored me on sustainable business models, and began forming what would become Elara Holdings. I worked 16-hour days and took red-eyes across the Pacific, negotiating silent partnerships in Bangkok, Seoul, and Sydney. I sold off everything I didn't need and reinvested the profits in high-end properties that I knew my family's chain would never touch, too progressive, too gimmicky, as my mother liked to say. But my gimmicks worked. By the time I turned 32, Elara Holdings owned a controlling interest in 7 independent resort brands and had quietly started acquiring stock in Wexley Heritage Hotels through layers of anonymous shell companies. No one noticed, not when I passed them at industry events, not when one of my properties won a 5-star global award they used to own exclusively, not even when Julian quoted one of my white papers during a panel without realizing it was mine. That was the moment I knew. They didn't just underestimate me. They forgot I could learn, and that I never forgot what they did, because that proposal they tossed aside, I didn't burn it. I built it, and it was making me millions while their occupancy rates started to slide year after year. So when I got the email from the Wexley family office about Julian's upcoming award ceremony, I didn't hesitate. I just checked the status of my next stock acquisition and clicked confirm. The week before the ceremony, I flew into Chicago under a different name. Not to hide, just to stay unseen until it mattered. I booked the penthouse suite at a hotel my family still believed was independently operated. They didn't know I had finalized the acquisition 3 months earlier. Every morning, I met with my operations lead, reviewed integration schedules, finalized the architectural drafts for the rebrand. At night, I attended quiet dinners with interior designers, loyalty program architects, and tech contractors. Every one of them thought they were working for different boutique clients. None of them knew they were shaping the future face of Wexley Heritage Hotels. And still, my parents thought I was in Portland, advising a mid-tier startup. 2 days before the awards, I stopped by the Wexley Grand unannounced. The front desk agent glanced at me, then down at his monitor. His eyes flicked upward again, hesitant. "Miss Wexley," he said, voice tight. "Your parents left instructions. You're to use the side entrance." I let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. "That won't be necessary." I walked through the lobby like I owned it. Because by then I nearly did 49.3%, with the final tranche of stock set to transfer during the ceremony itself. The ballroom was already being set. White linens, gold trim, obsolete grandeur, my mother's signature aesthetic. Everything looked exactly as it did when I was 13, sneaking hors d'oeuvres behind the banquet curtains while my father gave his annual speech about tradition and excellence. Except now the servers moving between tables worked for me. I recognized one of them, Marcus. He gave me the smallest nod, then kept moving. He was part of my audit team. His real task was to document the night's guest service lapses for our acquisition report. That evening, back at the penthouse, I reviewed the latest ratings. Guest satisfaction had dropped another 6% across 3 properties. A secret inspection from the 5-star committee was already underway. My team had made sure of it. Michael called just after midnight. "Final agreement's ready," he said. "The shell company goes over 51% as soon as the bank confirms transfer." And Julian, I asked, "He'll get his award, just not the legacy he thinks comes with it." I leaned against the balcony railing, staring at the Wexley Grand across the skyline. They still thought this night was about honoring him. They didn't know the press release was already drafted. That within the next 24 hours, Wexley Heritage would have a new controlling interest, a new CEO, and a new future. They thought I was an embarrassment, a deviation, a mistake, but they never understood what I was really building. A structure can't collapse from the outside. It collapses from within. And I had become the foundation they never saw shifting under their feet. The ballroom shimmered with too much gold and not enough warmth. Every chandelier, every velvet curtain, every outdated floral centerpiece screamed of a time when opulence was mistaken for innovation. I arrived alone, no assistant, no escort, just a structured black dress, my great-grandmother's pearl pin, one of the few family heirlooms they hadn't managed to erase from memory, and heels that echoed against the marble floor like punctuation. The hostess barely concealed her confusion when I gave my name. I could see her searching for an instruction in the system. "Miss Wexley," she said after a beat, forcing a smile. "Your family has reserved a seat at table 11, far right corner." Of course they had. Near the kitchen, just out of frame in every photo. "I'll find my way," I replied, stepping past her without pause. The room was filling quickly. Industry executives, board members, hospitality critics, and luxury travel bloggers all dressed for tradition. They didn't realize how many of the names on tonight's guest list were already under the Alara portfolio. Julian spotted me first. He waved across the room like a talk show host. "Serena, you made it. Come to witness the crowning." I took a glass of champagne from a passing server, again one of mine, and sipped. Cheap vintage. No depth, no edge. Fitting. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. At 7:46 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Michael, final transfer confirmed. 51.2%. You're officially in control." I didn't reply. I just slid the phone into my clutch and walked to the center of the room where the main screen displayed the Wexley crest in fading bronze. At 7:50, the lights dimmed. My father took the podium, voice booming with the self-importance of a man convinced he still held the reins. Welcome to the 38th Annual Wexley Awards, a celebration of resilience, excellence, and above all, family legacy. Applause. I didn't clap. He continued his speech word for word, the same as a decade ago, a relic of comfort recycled like the wallpaper in their Palm Springs property. And now he announced the Innovation in Hospitality Award for reimagining our guest experience and elevating the Wexley standard. My son, Julian Wexley. Julian walked toward the stage as if it had been built just for him. He adjusted his cufflinks, smiled into the crowd, raised a hand in mock humility, and then the screens went black. A beat of silence, confusion. Then, without warning, the Wexley crest disappeared. In its place, a real-time feed of performance metrics, declining revenue, plummeting guest ratings, negative audit scores, charts dipping like failed heart monitors, gasps. My father stepped forward. What is this? I stepped toward the stage. An update, I said calmly, and a long overdue one. All around the ballroom, murmurs spread like fire. Eyes turned toward me, toward the screens, toward the truth. The walls didn't fall that night. They simply stopped pretending to hold. My mother stood before I even reached the podium. Her face was frozen in a smile too tight to be real. Serena, this isn't the time, she said through clenched teeth. This is a family event. I agree, I replied, lifting the microphone. And I'd like to share what the family has accomplished. Behind me, the screen shifted again, this time to internal memos, maintenance backlogs, guest complaints, and inspection failures. The seal from the 5-star committee appeared in the corner, stamped in red, pending revocation. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Julian was still standing mid-stage, statue, still eyes darting from screen to screen. My father stepped toward me, voice low and sharp. You don't belong here. You don't speak for this company. I met his stare. Don't I? Michael, standing discreetly near the service doors, raised a folder. One by one, his team began distributing printed copies to each table. Inside documentation of the full acquisition, stock transfer confirmations, board filings, my name printed in bold, signed and witnessed. Whispers turned into open conversation, phones lit up. Investors stood rereading the documents with furrowed brows. I now hold 51.2% of Wexley Heritage Hotels, I said. Elara Holdings. My company has been acquiring shares for the past 22 months. Quietly, legally, strategically. My father's voice cracked. This is a hostile takeover. No, I said. This is accountability. Julian finally found his voice. You don't know what you're doing. You've never what I asked. Managed, audited, innovated. While you were changing font sizes on the minibar menu, I built a hospitality ecosystem that outperformed your entire chain before you even noticed. He turned pale. I turned back to the crowd. These numbers behind me, they aren't just statistics. They're the reason 3 properties are on probation. The reason your brand is losing market share month after month. Someone from the back called out, Are you really the CEO of Elara? I nodded once. Founder, CEO, majority shareholder. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was a recognition. They hadn't just ignored me. They had forgotten to even check. I stepped away from the microphone and let the weight of the truth settle across the room. Every flicker of data, every line item, every document, it all spoke louder than I ever had. My mother sank into a chair. My father took the folder from one of Michael's staff and read it, eyes trembling at the signature. Impossible, he whispered. I leaned in, not unkindly. You should have paid more attention to who owned the room. The screens faded to black. Then they lit up again, this time with the Elara logo. Sleek, modern, undeniably present. The room erupted. Reporters swarmed. Investors dialed. Julian tried to speak, but no one listened. Because in a room built to honor legacy, I had just rewritten it. 3 days later, I sat in the office my father had occupied for over 2 decades. The nameplate was gone. The leather chair replaced. The oak bookshelf now held binders with Elara's branding, not dusty volumes on traditional leadership. The carpet still bore the faint trace of where his desk used to sit, an imprint like a scar left behind by years of unquestioned authority. Michael entered with a tablet in hand and a look that said the morning had already been long. "They're here," he said simply. I nodded. "Bring them in." Security had already disabled their keycards the night after the ceremony, though Julian had tried to storm the executive suite twice. The last attempt ended with him locked out in front of a group of confused interns. Now they entered as a unit, my father tight-lipped and red around the collar. My mother wrapped in a Chanel coat she no longer wore with confidence, and Julian's shoulders square, but eyes flicking nervously between corners of the room. "You've made your point," my father started. "This isn't a point," I replied. "It's a new chapter." He stepped closer to my desk, palms pressing into the wood. "This company is still called Wexley. That name means something." "It used to," I said, "but it hasn't stood for excellence in years, and the market knows it." Julian spoke next, his voice thin. "You can't just erase us." "I'm not erasing anything," I said, "but I am documenting everything." Michael handed me the tablet. I turned it around and slid it across the table. "Line items, account statements, travel reimbursements. You've been submitting expenses for events that didn't exist, Julian, charging the company for personal vacations, inflated marketing invoices, and partnerships that were never approved." He paled. "This is fabricated," he stammered. "No, it's recorded, and the board will see it at the emergency session this afternoon." My mother clutched the arms of her chair. "We are family, Serena, yes," I said, voice calm, "which is why I'm offering you a choice. Sign the minority stakeholder agreements and retain a symbolic position, or I proceed with legal buyout at current market value, which I might remind you has dipped significantly since your last quarter's numbers." My father stared down at the contract Michael placed in front of him. "This is blackmail," Julian whispered. "It's math," I answered. No one moved. Then slowly my father picked up the pen. My mother closed her eyes. Julian didn't speak again. When the signatures were done, I stood, walked to the far wall, pressed a button. The wall panels folded inward, revealing 3 wide screens showing live feeds from all 17 Wexley, now Elara properties. In every corner of the world, signage was changing. The outdated gold and ivory logo dissolving into Elara's sleek silver crest. My father watched the screen, jaw tight. "You're destroying everything," he said. "No," I corrected. "I'm saving what little is left." The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp, but the room was already at full capacity by 9:40. Every seat in the Elara Executive Auditorium was occupied hospitality reporters, industry analysts, shareholder reps, a handful of skeptical legacy investors who hadn't bothered showing up to quarterly calls in years. Now they sat in the front row adjusting their ties, scanning their tablets, watching the screen at the center of the stage as it pulsed quietly with a global map. Each time the Elara crest replaced the Wexley Heritage logo on a property, Seoul, Madrid, Cape Town, Boston, a quiet ping sounded. A live cascade of transformation. I stood in the wings listening to it like a heartbeat. Michael handed me the final copy of the public transition statement. I didn't look at it. I had rewritten it so many times over the past year, it lived in me now, word for word. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for 3 years. The moment I stepped onto the stage, the room shifted. You could feel it. Not applause, not tension, more like held breath. Everyone already knew what had happened. The transfer, the ownership shift, the rebranding, the scandal that trailed behind Julian's expense records. But what they wanted now was narrative. They wanted the person behind the move to stand where she'd once been erased and speak. I gave them exactly that. 3 years ago, I was told my ideas were too ambitious, too modern, too disruptive for a company built on heritage. So I left, and while I was gone, I built. Behind me, the screen changed to global metrics, occupancy retention, environmental impact scores, direct booking ratios. Elara's numbers outpaced the industry in every column. I didn't come here to inherit the past. I came to design the future. No theatrics, just data truth and the quiet conviction of someone who had nothing left to prove. I answered questions calmly once I stepped down. Yes, the acquisition was strategic, not hostile. No, the Wexley family no longer holds controlling interest. Yes, we have already begun restructuring executive leadership. No, there are no plans to revert the brand. Most of the questions were expected, framed around legacy risk and market confidence. But then from the back, a woman with silver hair and a press badge from Hotelist Weekly raised her hand. "Miss Wexley," she said. "What made you finally decide to take control publicly? And all at once, that was the question." I turned slowly to look at the mezzanine wall behind the audience, where the original Wexley family portrait still hung. It was always there, even when I wasn't. My father at center stoic and broad-shouldered. Julian just behind him, leaning forward like he belonged there. My mother in soft beige polished and untouchable. And me, off to the side, slightly out of focus. A hand resting on my father's chair, but never quite touching. Cropped out of most press versions, forgotten in every boardroom. I realized I said into the mic, "You can't preserve a legacy by pretending it's still alive. Sometimes the most loyal thing you can do is let it go. Or burn it down, and build something better in its place." Flashbulbs went off in rapid bursts. The room erupted in scattered applause. But I didn't stay to soak in it. I walked straight out of the auditorium and up the east corridor to my new office. The space was nearly silent. Sunlight pooled across the desk where my father once dictated press releases and corrected staff for using the word trend. Michael followed me in with a slim wrapped package under his arm. "It was waiting at reception," he said. "From your mother." I raised a brow. "She's not one for gifts." She didn't include a note, just this. Inside was the original blueprint of the first Wexley Hotel, hand-drawn by my grandfather, on yellowing vellum, with pencil notations and layout sketches. But what caught my eye wasn't the structure. It was a name scribbled in the corner. Mine. Serena, lobby redesign it read, circled twice in red. I traced the ink with my thumb. She hadn't sent an apology, but maybe this was something close. I set the blueprint aside. Not framed, not hung. Just placed on the shelf behind me, where it could stay in the room without defining it. Because I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already rewritten the legacy, and I had done it under my own name. My name is Isabel Langford. I'm 31 years old, a field researcher in environmental biology, and the only person in my family who didn't receive anything when the inheritance was read, at least not at first. I still remember the polished edge of the conference table, how the overhead lights glinted off the crystal glasses like they were mocking me. My parents sat straight-backed, composed like seasoned diplomats. Across from them, my sister Adrienne leaned back in her chair, already smiling before the lawyer opened his mouth. She knew what was coming. I didn't. But I felt it. When the check was handed to her, $10 million, no hesitation, my father barely waited a breath before turning toward me. "You're smart. Go earn your own." I didn't cry, didn't blink. I just nodded slowly and folded my hands on my lap, as if I could press the sting back into my skin. The air in the room thinned. Adrienne adjusted her blazer, smug in her silence. My mother's expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked sideways as if avoiding a guilt she refused to name. Then a quiet cough broke the stillness. A man in a gray suit, older unfamiliar, stood up near the end of the table. "There's one more document," he said, his voice even. He held up a worn handwritten envelope. The second I saw the handwriting on it, my mother's smile dropped. And I knew without knowing how that my grandfather had left behind something they never planned for. And it had my name on it. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. The last time I saw my grandfather alive was over a year ago on a spring afternoon so quiet it felt borrowed. He was sitting under the old cottonwood tree behind the greenhouse, fingers stained from soil humming some tune he never named. I had driven down without telling anyone, just wanted to check on him, bring him a batch of those blueberry protein muffins he pretended to hate. He looked up when I arrived, smiled faintly, and said, "Took you long enough, kiddo." 2 weeks later, he had a stroke, and I didn't find out until after the funeral. They told me it was a private family affair. He passed peacefully. Adrienne had texted me after the fact, adding a passive note about how things happened fast. I flew to Georgia anyway, thinking maybe they were just too overwhelmed to reach out properly. When I got to the church, the parking lot was empty. The flowers were already wilted on the altar, and no one was waiting. Later that day, Adrienne called once, only to say I assumed you wouldn't want to be involved in the estate stuff. I didn't argue. What was the point? Back home, I packed away the sympathy card I'd bought, but never sent. I buried myself in fieldwork. Weeks bled into months, and the silence from my family never cracked. The only sound was the occasional forwarded newsletter. My mom still subscribed me to the kind sent to alumni, with updates on Adrian's community impact work. Then last week, an envelope arrived. No return address, but the postmark was Savannah. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper with a law firm's header and a line of printed text. You are formally invited to the private reading of Mr. Jonathan Langford's secondary testament. I sat with it for a long time, the letter open on my kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling beside it. No call from my mother, no email from Adrian. Just that envelope heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. I booked a flight that night, and as I stared out over the wing at the blue haze of the Georgia horizon, I didn't feel vindicated or angry, just ready. If there was anything left unsaid between me and the man who once showed me how to test river pH with a kit from a hardware store, I'd come to hear it. Not for them. For him. The house looked exactly the same. Weathered white shutters, mailbox slightly crooked magnolia trees leaning just enough to touch the porch eaves. And yet, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a place that had folded in on itself, polished, staged, and hollow. My mother opened the door with a neutral expression, the kind reserved for door-to-door political canvassers. "Isabel," she said flatly, "we weren't expecting you." "I was invited," I said, holding up the letter like a badge. From deeper inside, Adrian's voice floated through warm, sweet, practiced. "Is that her?" A moment later, she appeared all linen and pearls in perfect posture. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Wow, you really came." "That's brave." I didn't respond. She liked to bait me into scenes. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. The formal reading was scheduled for the next day, but the tension had already set in. I was assigned a guest room, the one without curtains, still musty from disuse. At dinner, conversation flowed like a rehearsed script. They asked about my job with a faintly patronizing curiosity, made tight-lipped remarks about tough funding seasons in academia, and toasted to Adrian's upcoming speaking engagement in Atlanta. No one mentioned my grandfather. No one said his name. After dinner, I excused myself and wandered into the den. The furniture had been rearranged, but the old record player still sat in the corner, collecting dust. I brushed a fingertip across its edge and let it hum to life for a moment before switching it off. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just wanted to feel something older than them. That's when I saw it, a manila envelope half tucked behind a stack of photo albums on the side table. My breath caught. My name was written in ink, neat and precise, unmistakably his. Inside wasn't a letter, not yet. Just a copy of a property deed and a single sticky note. If they pretend not to remember, this will help you remind them. J. The address was familiar, 28 Winthrop Hill Road. My grandfather's secondary property, the one he used as a workspace before retirement. I hadn't been there in years, and my parents had always brushed it off as an old tool shed he never finished fixing. But this wasn't a shed. The deed listed the structure as a research and innovation facility. I stood in that room for what felt like a full hour staring at the page as the sound of laughter floated in from the kitchen. Adrian's voice warm as syrup rose above the rest. I folded the deed carefully, tucked it into my bag, and climbed the stairs without a word. Whatever my grandfather had left it wasn't for them, and they knew it. The next morning, the garden was arranged like a wedding without a bride. White chairs lined both sides of a narrow aisle. A long table rested under a canopy of flowering vines, set with citrus water monogrammed napkins, and enough gloss to make anyone forget this was a funeral sequel, not a brunch. I arrived 10 minutes early. No one acknowledged me. Adrian made her entrance. Last arm looped through our father's, like they were about to close a business deal. Her dress was tailored navy pearls, tucked neatly at her throat, and that same glossy smile that always looked more painted than felt. My mother followed a step behind, nodding to guests like a gracious first lady. I sat near the end of the table, close to the gardener's shed, and as far from the head as possible, which I assumed was intentional. The family attorney, Mr. Cartwright, appeared precisely at 10, mid-60s gray hair, combed straight back posture, like a man who never sat unless paid to. He laid a leather folio on the table and cleared his throat with the kind of gravitas people only develop after 30 years of charging by the hour. "We'll begin with the primary estate allocation," he said, unfolding the first page, per the updated directive filed last fall. Adrian smiled. Everyone else just waited. As stipulated, Ms. Adrian Langford will receive $10 million from the Consolidated Trust. The distribution shall be processed through the Langford Family Holdings account within 10 business days. The room murmured its approval. Father gave her hand a quick squeeze. My mother beamed. Then Mr. Cartwright looked up. There is, however, a second directive sealed personal and delivered directly from the office of Mr. Jonathan Langford prior to his passing. It pertains to a property and research asset he classified as independent of the family trust. Silence. Adrian's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, what?" The lawyer retrieved a weathered envelope from the folio. My heart dropped as I recognized the writing. It was identical to the one I'd found in the den. Except this one wasn't hidden. It was about to be read aloud. Cartwright turned to me. "This section concerns Miss Isabel Langford." My father shifted. My mother looked like she'd been slapped with a newspaper headline. Adrian blinked twice, fast. Mr. Cartwright continued, voice smooth but pointed. "Mr. Langford bequeathed full ownership and executive control of 28 Winthrop Hill Road, including all on-site equipment, intellectual property, and development grants, to Miss Isabel Langford." Adrian's chair screeched back as she stood. "That's the old workshop," she snapped. "It was condemned. It has no value." Cartwright didn't flinch. The updated designation per zoning records and foundation registration identifies the site as the Langford Environmental Research Annex. It holds active federal licensing patent rights and an open grant with the Georgia Conservation Board. My mother spoke for the first time, her voice brittle. That facility was never meant for use. He hadn't touched it in years. "Incorrect," Cartwright said evenly. "According to notarized documents, Mr. Langford filed expansion plans as recently as 6 months ago, citing Isabel as the designated lead coordinator." Adrian's face had paled. "He never told me." "No," I said softly, looking directly at her. "He didn't." The moment cracked like glass under pressure. All the practiced smiles, the curated stories, the smug inheritance parade crumbled. In their place was silence, real hard and jagged. Mr. Cartwright closed the folder. "One final note," he said. "Mr. Langford requested a personal letter be read aloud. He wrote, and I quote, 'Not everyone deserves explanation, but she does.'" Then he handed me the envelope. And suddenly, every eye at the table belonged to me. The summons arrived 3 weeks later. A thick manila envelope delivered by hand to my apartment door. Inside, a formal complaint filed with the Chatham County Probate Court. Plaintiff Adrian Langford. Allegation: undue influence, exploitation of a vulnerable elder, fraudulent execution of property transfer. I didn't need to read the full thing to know what it meant. Adrian had decided to erase me again, this time with legal language and courtroom theatrics. I sat in my kitchen for a full hour, the envelope untouched, beside a half-finished cup of chamomile. And then I did what I knew she never expected. I called my attorney. Her name was Marla Jennings. 49 years old, Harvard-trained with a reputation in Georgia's legal circles for shredding false claims with the precision of a neurosurgeon. When I told her the situation, she didn't ask why it happened. She asked, "Do you have documentation?" I opened the metal box my grandfather had left me years ago, one I hadn't touched since college. Inside were labeled envelopes, notarized letters, printouts of expansion permits, even photos of the annex's interior bearing time-stamped metadata. And tucked in the lining of an old lab coat, a USB drive. I handed it to Marla. 2 weeks later, we walked into court. The room was full neighbors, distant cousins, a few reporters. Adrian sat flanked by a suited attorney who looked like he charged extra to blink. She wore a plum blazer and a stiff expression, like someone who couldn't decide whether she was the victim or the star witness. When the judge entered, Honorable Diane Reeve, late 50s, silver braid down her back, and eyes that missed nothing, everyone rose. And then the evidence began. Marla stood calmly and presented the first piece, a medical affidavit signed by Dr. Hurst confirming my grandfather's mental clarity in the weeks before his death. Then came the property documentation, registered research plans, and environmental grant approval forms filed with my name 6 months prior. Adrian's lawyer objected, tried to imply coercion. Marla countered with the video. It played on the overhead screen footage taken inside the annex. My grandfather sat at the work table, his eyes sharp, voice steady. "If you're watching this, then Adrian's decided to fight. That's fine. Let her. But I want the court to know I wasn't pressured. I wasn't confused. I simply chose differently than expected." He paused, then looked straight into the lens. "I didn't change my will to punish Adrian. I changed it to protect Isabel, because one of them showed up for the work. The other showed up for the camera." The courtroom went still. Adrian didn't stand. She didn't shout. Her hands gripped the table edge so tightly, her knuckles went white. Marla closed the laptop softly and turned to the judge. "We rest, Your Honor." Judge Reeve didn't speak immediately. She looked at Adrian, then at me. "Miss Langford," she said to Adrian, "do you wish to respond?" Adrian tried. "Truly." Her lips parted, but her voice never came, and that silence said more than any closing argument could. The ruling came down a week later. Judge Reeve upheld the will and every directive attached. Her words were clear, unflinching. The transfer of the annex to me was lawful, intentional, and consistent with Mr. Jonathan Langford's demonstrated values and prior behavior. Adrian's case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile, not unless she found evidence that didn't exist. I didn't attend the ruling. I already knew what mattered. I was in Winthrop Hill by then, standing barefoot on the annex's unfinished hardwood floors, brushing years of dust from the light switches, and remembering the way my grandfather used to whistle as he wiped down every microscope lens by hand. The place had been closed off since the day he died, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. The seed vault still carried his handwriting on every label. A single lab coat hung behind the door pocket, stitched loosely where he'd always kept peppermint chews. The whiteboard on the south wall still bore a half-erased diagram of wetland filtration. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood there breathing in the silence. The next morning, I rolled up my sleeves. It began slowly cleaning, cataloging, restoring power, applying for municipal permits. I filed 3 grants. 2 were rejected, 1 passed. Enough to get the doors open. Enough to say, "We're here." I called 2 colleagues from grad school, people who once felt like me, quiet, overprepared, too intense for conference cocktail hours. We borrowed folding tables, reconditioned the spectrometers, and held our first workshop with 4 students and a secondhand projector. The annex began to breathe again. One morning, 6 months in a small padded envelope arrived at our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a document titled "Bridging the Gap: Communication Tools for Youth Outreach in STEM." It was written with care, not academic, not flashy, just thoughtful, designed to help kids explain complex ideas in plain English. The formatting was clean, the tone was gentle, the examples practical. At the very end, handwritten in soft blue ink for the ones who never got to ask their questions out loud. No signature, but I didn't need one. I stared at the envelope for a long time, not because I wanted to respond, but because something about it felt like a door. Not a grand apology, not a rewrite of the past, but a quiet knock that didn't expect to be let in. I didn't call Adrian. I didn't email. But I kept the guide. Filed it under internal training materials. Some days I took it out just to reread the margin notes. There was one comment circled in pencil that stuck with me. Validation doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be consistent, and strangely it was. Twice a year after that, the same handwriting would show up in small packages. One time it was a workshop script on how to coach introverted students. Another, a suggested curriculum for middle school girls in STEM. She never signed anything. I never replied. But I used them. Not because I needed Adrian to be part of the story, but because the kids deserved everything she had to offer now that she was finally offering it without the spotlight. It's been 3 years since the will reading. 3 years since I sat at the end of that linen-covered table, listening to my name spoken aloud in a way it never had been before, with intention, with weight. Since Adrian's mask cracked in the sunlight, and my mother shifted her gaze to the ivy behind me, instead of facing what none of them expected, I was the one he trusted. But that moment passed, and I didn't stay there. I came here back to Winthrop Hill, back to the annex my grandfather left, not just as an inheritance, but as a place of belief. He didn't build it for ceremony, he built it for continuation. And that's exactly what I've tried to do. The Langford Environmental Annex is no longer just a line item buried in a will. It's now a living ecosystem of research, of learning, of quiet minds, finally given the room to speak. We've expanded the greenhouse twice. We offer fellowships for underrepresented students in biology. Last summer, we installed solar irrigation across the South Field and built a data tower to track long-term climate changes in native soil systems. But none of that is what makes it sacred to me. What matters most are the Thursdays. That's when we open the doors to the public. Let the neighborhood kids and their parents walk through, touch the microscopes, ask too many questions. There's always one shy unsure who hovers at the edge. And when they finally ask, "Is it okay if I try?" we hand them a journal. On the first page, you don't have to be loud to matter. Those words used to be a whisper I told myself when no one clapped. Now they're a promise I pass on. Adrian never called, she never apologized, but twice a year, a cream-colored envelope arrives, no name, no return address. Inside always something useful, a draft curriculum for mentoring sessions, an annotated script for helping students present without freezing up. On the last one, in faint blue ink tucked into the margin, I didn't understand before. I think I do now. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is accept help without reopening the wound. I used her materials the following week. One student, Jamal, age 14, eyes like he's always watching for the door, stood in front of his classmates and explained how worms affect root systems in poor soil. His hands shook, his voice cracked, but he finished, and when the class clapped, he didn't duck. Afterward, he came up to me and said, "That was the first time I talked in front of people and didn't want to disappear." I smiled. "That's because you showed up like yourself. And that's always enough." I think about my grandfather every day, not with sadness, but with steadiness. His bench still sits beneath the pecan tree where the blueberries refuse to grow. I go there sometimes after everyone leaves. I sit with the wind and the silence and the creak of old wood beneath me. I don't speak, I don't pray, I just stay. Because that's what he gave me, not land, not money, not status, but the permission to remain. To take up space without apology, to choose stillness over spectacle, and most of all, to keep what was mine all along: a place, a voice, a future.